Today, we're in week 3 of our series, and living in the presence of God, filled. And today is a topic that I wish, when I was younger, someone would have spoke to me more about, especially as somebody who grew up in the church world. If you don't know, I have graduated with a 4.0 in Christianese. From what university, I don't know, but I grew up with the church lingo. I know how to speak it. I know how church is supposed to work, if you will. I've seen all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this morning, I just wanted to take a few minutes and look at, when worship becomes work. Our primary text today is Luke chapter 10. We're going to go to verse 38 through 42 in a minute. But see, there's this moment that happens in a lot of our lives where we realize we're running on empty. And we've been running on empty for a while. Maybe you're there right now. You wake up tired. You go to bed tired. And somewhere in the middle, you're checking off tasks, meeting deadlines, showing up for people, trying to keep all the plates spinning and spinning and spinning. And if you're a person of faith, you're also trying to pray, read your Bible, serve at church, be a good witness, and live out your values. You're trying to do all the things right. And here's what's wild. You can be doing all the right things and still miss the one thing that matters most. That's what we're talking about today, because we're in week 3 of this series, and we've been exploring what it actually means to experience God's presence in our everyday lives. Not just to know God, know about God, but to actually know God. Not just to serve God, but to be with God. Today we're going to sit with one of the most famous stories in the Gospels. One you've probably heard 100 times if you grew up in church. I know I did. It's the story of Mary and Martha. And I know what you're thinking. Some of you that know this story and have heard it preached before. You're thinking, oh great, another sermon about Mary and Martha, where Martha gets thrown under the bus and we feel guilty about being productive. But I want you to stay with me, because I think this story is trying to rescue us from something we don't even realize is killing us. It's trying to rescue us from a version of faith that runs on performance, that measures our worth by our output, that mistakes, busyness for faithfulness. It's trying to show us that God isn't looking for workers, He's looking for worshipers. He doesn't want your resume, He wants your attention. He doesn't want your production, He wants your presence. So let's read it together. Luke 10, 38 through 42. It says, as Jesus and His disciples were on their way, He came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to Him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what He said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to Him and asked, Lord, don't you care? Oh, let me start that over. She came to Him and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? I know how this sounds. I have 3 sons. I heard it yesterday. You're not helping me clean my room. That's your stuff. She goes, tell her to help me. And how does Jesus respond? He says, Martha, Martha. The Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, Mary, but a few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. So first, we're going to talk about Martha's good intentions versus Mary's better choice. So let's start with this. Martha isn't the villain of this story. We need to get that straight right here. Martha is doing something genuinely good. She opened her home to Jesus. She's preparing a meal. She's serving Jesus. In first century Jewish culture, hospitality wasn't just nice. If you've come to our Wednesday night Bible study, as we've walked through Genesis, we've talked about hospitality. You see, to them, it was sacred. It was a way of honoring God by honoring God's people. And Martha is going all out. The text says she's distracted by all the preparations. The Greek word there is perispao. It means to be pulled away, to be dragged in different directions. Picture Martha in the kitchen, and there's bread to bake, wine to pour, and vegetables to chop, and cushions to arrange, and she's trying to make everything perfect because Jesus is here. Ladies, this is like if your great-grandmother is coming to your house. I don't know if you've ever been there, or if you have one of those Southern grandmas that's really nitpicky. You're worried she's coming to your house because she's going to judge everything. That feeling you have of, I've got to get it already. I've experienced this. I have, like I said, 3 sons. And Lisa and I both work. We stay busy. So sometimes when people say they're coming over, it's like, oh no. Baby, am I wrong? No. It's like nothing in the world matters at that moment than the cleanliness of the den, the kitchen, and for some reason, my kids' room, which is going to be decimated within 3.5 seconds of it being clean. But in those moments, in our mind, nothing else matters other than making sure the house, the meal, everything is ready. That's kind of where Martha was in this story. She's so worried about getting everything ready because of cultural expectation, familial expectation, everything in her life. She was trying to get it perfect because Jesus is here. Someone was coming into her house. Not just someone, but Jesus. Her intentions are pure. Her motivations are right. She's serving Jesus. What could be wrong with that? And then there's Mary. Mary, who has abandoned social convention and sat down at Jesus' feet like a disciple. See, in that culture, women didn't typically sit at a rabbi's feet. That was a position reserved for students, for men who were being trained in the Torah. But Mary doesn't care. She's not in the kitchen. She's not helping. She's just sitting there, soaking it in, listening to Jesus teach. And Martha is furious. You can hear it in her voice when she storms in and says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Can we just acknowledge how relatable that is just a little bit? You've been Martha before in that moment. We've been running around doing all the things, serving and working and producing and making it happen while other people just seem to sit there. How many of us have looked at someone who seems to have margin in their life, who seems to prioritize rest and prayer and quiet, and thought, man, that must be nice? Some of us have actual responsibilities. Well, you thought it before. But here's where Jesus does something that must have shocked everyone in the room. He doesn't commend Martha's hard work. He doesn't tell Mary to get up and help. Instead, he says, Martha, Martha. And the repetition of her name, that's tenderness. That's gentleness. That's not anger. That's the voice of someone who loves you enough to tell you the truth. You are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. What is the one thing? It's not a task. It's not a to-do list item. It's presence. It's sitting at Jesus' feet. It's choosing intimacy over activity. Mary has chosen the better thing, Jesus says. Not the only good thing, not the only acceptable thing, but the better thing. And here's what's so important for us to understand about this. Jesus isn't saying that work is bad. He's not saying serving is wrong. He's saying there's a hierarchy, there's an order, and relationship comes before activity. Being comes before doing. Knowing God comes before serving God. Because here's the thing Martha doesn't realize yet. All her work for Jesus is keeping her from Jesus. Her service has become a substitute for intimacy. And a lot of us are living the exact same way. You see, when ministry becomes a substitute for intimacy, it becomes a dangerous trap that those of us in church culture fall into all the time. I know, because I've fallen into it. We start to confuse activity for God with intimacy for God. We measure our spiritual health by how busy we are in ministry rather than how connected we are to the heart of God. We think, I'm serving in children's ministry. I'm on the worship team. I'm leading a Bible study or a small group. I'm volunteering, giving food to people. Surely I must be close to God, right? But you can't be serving God and not really know God. You can be working for Jesus and still be far from Jesus. In Matthew 11:28-30, Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. And that sounds good. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Did you catch that? Jesus doesn't say, come to me and I'll give you more work. He says, come to me and I'll give you rest. The invitation isn't to productivity. It's to presence. It's to a way of being with him that's gentle, that's sustainable, that brings rest to your soul. But somewhere along the way, we turn this Christian life into a performance. We turned grace into a grading system. We started measuring our worth by our output, our value by our productivity, our standing with God by how much we accomplish for God. And listen, I get it. I'm a pastor, right? I've built a career out of working for God. I know how easy it is to hide in the work. I know how much safer it feels to be busy than it is to be still. Because when you're busy, you don't have to face what's really going on inside. When you're performing, you don't have to deal with your anxiety, your insecurity, your fear that maybe you're not actually enough. You see, ministry can become a really sophisticated form of avoidance. It becomes the thing we do to feel valuable, to earn God's approval, to prove that we matter. And the truly, truly tragic thing is that we can build our entire lives, even entire ministries, on this foundation of performance and never realize that we're slowly dying inside. See, there's this moment in 1 Samuel 16:7 where God says something that stops me in my tracks every time I read it. Samuel is looking for the next king of Israel. He sees Jesse's oldest son, Eliab, and he thinks, surely this is the one. Look at him, tall, strong, impressive, just like Pastor Ty. But God says to him, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. People look at the outward appearance. People measure by performance, by productivity, by results. But God looks at the heart. God cares about what's happening inside. God wants intimacy, not just impact. Do I want to have an impactful church? Of course. But not at the sake of having intimacy with our Father. If we miss the intimacy, we miss the whole thing. This is where it kind of gets uncomfortable because most of us are way more comfortable being evaluated on our performance than on our hearts. Performance you can control. Hearts are messy. Hearts are vulnerable. Hearts require you to stop hiding behind your achievements and actually be known. But that's what God wants. He wants you, not your resume. He wants your heart, not your hustle. You see, even Jesus stopped doing to simply be. Jesus, who had the most important mission in human history, who came to save the world, who only had 3 years to accomplish everything. Even Jesus regularly stopped doing ministry to simply be with the Father. Let's look at this rhythm of Jesus' life in the Gospels. Mark 1:35 says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Luke 5:16 tells us, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Before major decisions, before big ministry moments, after intense seasons of serving, Jesus withdrew. He stopped. He got alone with the Father. Think about that. Jesus is healing the sick, casting out demons, teaching the crowds, transforming lives, and he stops. He walks away from the people who need him. He leaves the work undone. He goes to find a solitary place and simply communes with the Father. If Jesus, who was actually saving the world, needed that rhythm of withdrawal and presence, what makes us think that we don't? But we've convinced ourselves that we can't afford to stop. We look at our calendar and our responsibilities and our bank accounts and our broken world, and we think, I don't have time to rest. I don't have time to just be with God. There's too much to do. Jesus is saying that's exactly backwards. You don't have time to not be with me. The doing flows from the being. The ministry flows from the intimacy. The creativity flows from the time spent with him. The work is sustained by the worship. There's this moment in 1 Kings 19 that I think captured this so well. So it's Elijah. He's just had this massive victory over the prophets of Baal. Like, I love telling my kids this story. It's epic. Fire from heaven. Dramatic showdown. The people turning back to God. It's the spiritual high of his life. And then Jezebel threatens to kill him. And Elijah, having this great moment, has to flee. He runs. He goes into the wilderness, sits under a tree, and basically tells God, I'm done. He can't do this anymore. And God doesn't even give him a pep talk. God doesn't tell him to try harder. God feeds him, lets him sleep, and then meets him in a cave. And here's what happens in 1 Kings 19:11 through 13. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Man, whoa, that sounds so cool to me. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. That's so epic. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came fire. I love fire. It's so cool. I'm a pyro. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. You see, God wasn't in the earthquake. God wasn't in the fire. God wasn't in the spectacular, impressive, the loud, the pretty things. God was in the whisper, in the stillness, in the quiet. And Elijah had to stop, had to cease from all his doing and performing and achieving to hear it. How much of God are we missing because we won't stop long enough to listen? How many whispers have we drowned out with our noise, our hurry, our constant motion, our calendar, our stuff? Sometimes we need to stop doing and start being. Not because the work doesn't matter, but because we matter. And God wants us, just our output. You see, rest is resistance in a performance-driven culture. We live in a culture that worships productivity, that measures your worth by your output, that asks, "What do you do?" before it asks, "Who are you?" Sometimes the church operates the same way. We too often baptize this worldview and call it faithfulness. If you're willing to tell us what you do before showing us who you are. We adopt this mentality. We've created a Christian culture where busyness is a badge of honor, where exhaustion is proof of devotion, where rest feels lazy and margin feels irresponsible. We've turned the Sabbath into a suggestion instead of a commandment. We've made hurry our liturgy and stress our spiritual practice. And slowly we're dying. We're burning out. We're anxious and overwhelmed and running on empty. And somewhere deep down we know something's wrong. But we don't know how to stop because stopping feels like failure. But what if rest isn't failure? What if rest is resistance? What if choosing to be still in a world that demands constant motion is one of the most radical acts of faith that we can practice? When you take Sabbath, when you cease from your productivity and simply receive God's presence, you're making a countercultural declaration. You're saying, my worth isn't centered around my output. My value doesn't come from what I accomplish. I am loved not because of what I do, but because who I am. I am a child of God, made in his image, delighted in by the Father. That's what Mary understood. And that's what Martha was missing. And that's what so many of us are missing too. Jesus invites us into a different way. In Matthew 11, right after he says, "Come and to me, and I'll give you rest," he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." A yoke is a wooden beam that connected two oxen together so they could pull a plow, and it's not light. I had my youth pastor put one on my shoulders once with another kid whenever we were in high school and trying to demonstrate this. You know what? It's really hard to move your own direction when you're tied together. That's another sermon. Anyway. But what Jesus is saying is get yoked to me. Let me set the pace. Let me carry the weight. Learn my rhythm. Because when two animals are yoked together, they move at the same pace, rate, style. Their gait becomes the same. And what's Jesus' rhythm? Well, it says, I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Gentleness, humility, rest. I talk with all of you. You all need rest. Rest, that's the way of Jesus. Not frenzy, not performance, not earning approval through exhaustion. Been there, done that. I have the t-shirt. It's framed in my closet. Just kidding, it's really not. You see, the yoke of Jesus is easy and his burden is light because he's not asking you to prove yourself. He's inviting you to be yourself, your real, honest, broken, beloved self. He wants you in his presence. So what does God really want from you? What is he actually after? Well, I'll tell you, it's not your performance or your productivity. It's not your ability to keep all the plates spinning, although sometimes that's really impressive when you watch the guys at the circus do that. He wants your heart. He wants your attention. He wants your presence. In Hosea 6:6, God says through his prophet, for I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. I don't want your religious performance, God says. I want your heart. I want you to actually know me, not just perform rituals for me. Sunday can become a ritual. Even altar time can become a ritual. Jesus quotes this verse twice in the Gospels. He's trying to get the point across. God isn't impressed by your ability to show up and go through the motions. He's moved by your willingness to sit at his feet and actually be with him. I want you to think about any important relationships you have in your life, any of them. Imagine if the person you love the most came to you and said, I've decided I'm going to serve you really well. I'm going to cook for you and clean for you and do all kinds of helpful things. But I don't really have time to talk to you or be with you because I'll be too busy serving you. Personally, if Lisa came to me and said that, I'd be heartbroken. Because what you want isn't their service, it's their presence. You want to be known by them and you want to know them. You want intimacy, not just assistance. That's what God wants from you. He wants you to stop trying so hard to impress him and just come and be with him. He wants you to know that you are loved, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. You are, now really catch this, you are his child. You are chosen, beloved, delighted in. Before you ever did a single thing for him, he loved you. And nothing you do will ever make him love you more or less. So let me ask some questions, and I want you to sit with these honestly. And don't use Sunday school answers when you're trying to answer these internally. Think about these things. Are you serving God or are you knowing God? Because you can serve God without knowing God. You can be incredibly busy in ministry and incredibly far from intimacy. Is your relationship with God primarily transactional? You do things for him and in return you feel valuable, or as if he should do things for you? Or is it relational? And you just want to sit at his feet? Do you know him? Not know about him, but do you know him? Have you encountered his presence lately? Or have you just been maintaining your religious obligations? When was the last time you just sat with him? When was the last time you weren't asking him for something or working for him or performing for him, but just sat there? Just received. Just let yourself be loved. What would change if you believed you were loved? Not because of what you do, but because of who you are and who he is. What would you stop doing if you truly believed that? What anxiety would you let go of? What performance would you finally rest from? I want to give you a practical challenge this week, and I know it's going to feel impossible for some of you. Some of you are going to be like, there's no way I can do this. Take a Sabbath. What? Yes. A full day where you cease striving and simply receive. No work, no productivity, no trying to get ahead or catch up. Just rest, just presence, just being with God and letting yourself be loved. For some of you, that's going to feel impossible. You're going to think, I can't afford to take a whole day off. I have too much to do. And that's exactly why you need to do it. Because when you can't imagine stopping, when rest feels impossible, that's when you most need it. That's when your identity has gotten tangled up in your productivity, and you need to remember who you are apart from what you do. For others of you, Sabbath is going to feel uncomfortable because it's going to force you to be still. And stillness is where all the stuff you've been avoiding comes to the surface. The anxiety you've been outrunning, the loneliness you've been numbing with busyness, the questions you've been drowning out with noise. But that's also exactly why you need it. Because God meets you in the stillness. God speaks in the quiet. God heals what you've been hiding. Mary chose the better thing. She chose presence over performance. She chose intimacy over activity. She chose to receive rather than to strive. And Jesus says that choice, that one thing, will never be taken away from her. What if you chose it too? What if this week you stopped trying to earn what you already have and just received it? What if you put down your to-do list and picked up your belovedness? What if you let yourself be found by the God who isn't looking for workers but worshipers? He doesn't really want your hustle. He wants your heart. God's not impressed by your performance, but he is moved by your presence. You see this over and over again in the Old Testament. I often questioned why when these men of God in the Old Testament would have these conversations, why it always seemed like God would do the things that they were asking him to do. And I realized it's because they were in his presence. You wonder why God sometimes feels like he's not in your corner, because you're not even in the same area as him. You're way off in left field and he's still in the dugout. You say, hey, come be with me. This morning I got up and I sat on my couch. I don't know why I get up so early on Sundays. I really don't. I have no reason to get up so early. But I got up this morning and I want to tell you, I made the first cup of coffee that I've had this year. And it was delicious. Today is day 21. And I was like, God, you've fulfilled the things that I've been asking for. And today, I'm just moving into what's next. So I got up and I was like making coffee. I sat on the couch, turned on some worship music, And I realize the window is open, and I'm fine with that. It's 5:00 in the morning. Who cares? And I'm sitting on my couch, and I'm just like, God, whatever you want to do today. I drink my coffee, and I pray. I drink my coffee, and I pray. And then I read John 21, and man, that hit me right in the face. When Jesus asked the question, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? He got to ask the question because the disciples moved from the boat to the shore and they were in his presence. So they got to have a conversation with him. And I was sitting there and I never really thought about that aspect before. I always get hung up on the do you love me, then feed my lambs. Do you love me, then tend my sheep. Do you love me, then feed my sheep. But this morning as I was choosing presence, I was trying to figure out how I could best encourage you to do the same thing. How can we move into his presence? How do we close a service about presence? We had a wonderful worship time. We had people praying and worshiping, and we prayed for families. And I'm like, God, I don't want to kill the momentum of the day. And I was reminded of a service that I watched this week. And as the guy was ministering, he just stopped. And nobody likes when the minister or the preacher or the pastor just stops and says, hey, we're going to sit in silence for just a few minutes. He left the music playing, but nobody was guiding prayer. Nobody was, shouting prayer or speaking prayer and praise in the room. They were just there. They were just in the room. So Lisa, if you would come play this morning, this is how we're going to close. And it's going to be awkward for some of you. It's going to be uncomfortable for some of you. But for the next few minutes, I challenge you to kneel at your seat or find a place. I know it's concrete. I know it's hard. But even if you just want to stand this morning, seek the presence